Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. My mother drove a trash bag hard into my chest. The plastic bit my forearms as I tried to catch it. I am Daniel and 41 now, but that night I was 16 and stupid enough to think it was a threat. She pointed at the door and told me to get out before she changed her mind. Her boyfriend leaned in the hallway with his arms crossed. He watched like it was a show he had already seen. I could not look at him because I knew he was enjoying every second. My mother jerked her chin toward the porch and told me to move. I planted my feet and tried to steady the bag. It felt heavier than it had any right to feel. I asked what she was doing and my voice came out thin. She said I could take my junk or leave it for the trash guys, but either way I was done in her house. Back then I still believed there were lines she would not cross. I waited for the laugh or the sigh or the usual long lecture. Instead, she grabbed the door handle and swung it open so wide it shook. Cold air rushed in and she told me again to get out. I tried one last thing and asked where she expected me to go. My throat tightened halfway through the sentence and the words stuck. She said that was my problem now because I wanted to act grown. Her boyfriend laughed under his breath and said grown men find their own place. Something in me snapped and I dropped the bag at her feet. I told her she could not just throw me away like that. My voice shot up and cracked in the middle, which did not help. She stepped right into my space and told me to try her. Her hand brushed my shoulder as she crowded me toward the door. It was not a shove yet, but it was close. I could feel her daring me to push back so she would win bigger. I moved first because I knew if it turned into a fight, I would lose more than a roof. I stepped onto the porch and the night hit me like a wall. My sock slid a little on the boards and I grabbed the frame to steady myself. She stayed inside with one hand on the knob and one on the edge. Her eyes were dry, which somehow hurt more than yelling. She kicked the first bag across the threshold so it landed beside me. Then she disappeared for a second and came back with another one. This time she did shove it into my chest and it drove the air out of me. She told me that was everything I deserved and I better not leave it on her porch. The door started to close and panic finally outran my pride. I jammed my foot against the frame and grabbed the edge. For a second we wrestled with the door and neither of us spoke. Then she leaned her weight into it and hissed that if I stepped back inside she would call the police. I believed her because she had used that threat before in smaller fights. Back then I always backed down before it got this far. That night something about her face told me she would actually do it. I pulled my foot away and the door slammed so hard the glass rattled. I stood there with my hands still out like the door might reopen. My fingers tingled from how hard I had held the frame. I listened for footsteps or her voice or even his laugh. Nothing came through the wood, just a dull silence that made my stomach lurch. The porch light flicked off and I froze like an idiot. That small click felt worse than any insult she had thrown. It meant I was not even worth leaving the light on for. I stared at the door until my vision blurred and still waited for it to open. Eventually, the dark pressed in enough that I started to move. I groped around for the bags and nearly tripped over one. My arms shook when I tried to lift them and that scared me more. 16 is supposed to feel invincible, yet I could barely get my stuff off the porch. I dragged the bags down the steps one at a time. Each thud echoed louder than it should have on that quiet street. Part of me hoped a neighbor would step out and ask questions. No one did, and a bigger part of me was relieved because I had no answers. I set the bags near the curb and straightened up too fast. The world tilted for a second and my knees almost buckled. I told myself I was just tired, not scared. That lie held for about 3 breaths before my chest started to pound again. I checked my pockets because that felt like something useful to do. I found a crumpled bill, some coins, and my phone. The screen lit up my hands and showed a battery icon barely clinging on. $20 and almost no charge, that was the entire plan for my life. I thought about calling the house even though I knew better. Maybe she would cool off, maybe this was just a stunt. My thumb hovered over the number for a full minute. Then I locked the phone because I knew if he answered first I might beg and hate myself forever. I started walking because standing still made me feel hunted. The bags bumped against my legs and threw off my balance. I knew there was a gas station a few blocks away with light and people. If I could make it there, I could charge my phone and fig. Ray out what came next. Every step away from the house felt like it should hurt more. Instead, I felt numb all the way up to my teeth. Cars rolled past and none of them slowed, which somehow made the whole thing feel both safer and worse. I kept imagining my mother's silhouette in the window, watching to make sure I did not come back. The gas station buzzed ahead of me like a tiny island. Automatic doors parted when I stepped close and warm air wrapped around me. For a second, I just stood there inside and soaked in the noise of people talking. Nobody looked twice at the kid hauling his life in trash bags, and that almost broke me. I bought the cheapest drink I could find so I was not just loitering. The clerk glanced at the bags and then at my face. His eyebrows twitched like he wanted to ask something, then he rang me up instead. I grabbed the receipt with shaking fingers and wished he would either ignore me completely or go all in. There was an outlet near the door and I headed straight for it. My hands clutched the charger like it was some kind of rescue line. I plugged in the phone and watched the tiny icon blink to life. While it climbed 1 miserable% at a time, I opened my contacts and stared at the list. I scanned through names that suddenly felt useless. There were teachers and kids from class and numbers I barely recognized. Every option came with a different brand of humiliation. I stopped on my friend Mark because he was the only one who had ever told me I could crash at his place if things got bad. I did not want to be the kid who actually made that call. Part of me still believed this was temporary and I would end up back in my own bed. Another part whispered that if I did not move fast, I would end up nowhere. My thumb pressed the call button before I could vote on it. Mark picked up on the third ring with music blaring behind him. He shouted my name like it was a joke and asked what was up. I opened my mouth to say I was fine and heard something else spill out. I told him I was standing at a gas station with 2 bags and no place to sleep. There was a pause on the line that felt way too long. Then the music in his background dropped and his voice came back low. He asked if my mother had really kicked me out or if this was some fight I could fix. I said she had turned off the porch light on me and that detail shut him up fast. He told me to stay where I was and that he would talk to his mom. The line clicked silent and I was left with my reflection in the dark screen. My heart hammered in time with the buzzing lights above the door. I knew that whatever answer came back next would decide what the rest of that night looked like. Looking back now, that moment feels louder than the slam of the door. This was the point where my life could have folded or stretched. I did not know it then, I just knew my feet hurt. I stared at the phone and waited for it to light up, convinced that if it stayed dark I would simply keep walking until I dropped. The phone started vibrating on the counter and I jumped. Mark's name flashed on the screen like it was mocking me. My hand hovered a second because I knew whatever came next would stick. I dragged in a breath, hit accept and pressed the phone tight to my ear. "Where are you?" His voice came through without any background noise this time. I told him the store name and that I had 2 bags and nowhere else. On his end there was a muffled exchange, then a short curse, then nothing. I talked to my mom. He sounded older in that moment than I had ever heard. "She's not thrilled, but she says you can stay tonight." He added tonight in a way that made my stomach twist hard. He told me not to move and that they were already in the car. Then the line cut and I was left with the dial screen again. I stared at the reflection of my own face until it went dark. I shoved the charger in my pocket and tried not to pace. The clerk narrowed his eyes when I slid the drink cup in the trash. "You waiting on somebody?" He leaned back a little, arms crossing in slow curiosity. "Yeah, ride's coming," I answered, hoping he would not ask for details. A car pulled into the lot faster than it should have. Headlights swept over the glass doors and my heartbeat tried to match them. I recognized Mark climbing out from the passenger side and felt a weird mix of relief and shame. His mother stepped out from behind the wheel and locked the vehicle with a sharp click. Mark jogged toward me first and pulled me into a short, awkward half-hug. He let go quickly like he was afraid to squeeze too hard. Behind him, his mother stopped in front of the store and looked me up and down. Her jaw tightened, then she asked where my things were. I pointed to the bags near the sliding door and tried to keep my voice steady. She walked past me and tested their weight with one quick lift. "You're lucky we were still awake," she said, not looking at my face. Then she told Mark to grab one while she took the other. We loaded everything into the trunk in silence. I climbed into the backseat and pulled the door shut with a soft thud. For a few seconds nobody spoke, then the engine turned over and we rolled out of the lot. My chest loosened just a little when the store lights disappeared in the mirror. Did you run away or did she kick you out? Her question dropped into the dark car without warning. I watched the back of her head and weighed how honest I could afford to be. She kicked me out, I answered, my nails pressing crescents into my palms. Why? She used that one word like a flashlight on my face. She says I'm disrespectful, we fought, she told me to leave. Even as I spoke, I could hear how incomplete it sounded. She let out a short breath that could have been a laugh or a sigh. My house is not a hotel, she warned, eyes still on the road. You can stay until we figure something out, but this is temporary. Temporary echoed in my head like a ticking clock. We pulled into their driveway and Mark hopped out first. He grabbed one bag and dragged it inside without being prompted. I followed slower, every step feeling like I was trespassing on something soft. His mother locked the door behind us with a quick twist and turned to face me. Ground rules. She held up one hand like she was counting them off. You're a guest, so you pick up after yourself, you keep quiet at night, and you listen when I speak. I nodded too fast and almost cut her off with yesies. You'll sleep on the couch. She glanced toward the living room and then back at me. Bathroom is down the hall, ask before you use anything you didn't bring. Her eyes lingered on my worn sneakers like they offended the floor. Mark gestured toward the sofa with a quick lift of his chin. We'll find you a blanket, he muttered and headed down the hallway. I put my bags down as gently as if they might explode. The cushions sagged when I finally sat and my legs felt hollow. That first night I lay curled on the edge, fully dressed. Every creak made me jerk my head toward the doorway. I could hear faint voices drifting from the back of the house. My name floated out once, then the word trouble, then the words wrong example. I stared at the ceiling and counted each time a car passed outside. I told myself I would leave before they had a chance to regret helping. At the same time, I knew I had nowhere else lined up. That conflict kept me wide awake until the sky outside lightened. Morning hit fast because sleep never really did. I heard cabinets opening, water running, chairs scraping. Mark poked his head around the doorway and raised his eyebrows. You up, you should eat before my dad leaves. His father was already at the table when I walked into the kitchen. He flicked his eyes over me once, then focused back on his plate. Mornings, he murmured, not unkind, not warm either. I mumbled a greeting and hovered behind a chair, afraid to sit. Sit down, you need food if you're going to fix this mess. Mark's mother slid a plate toward the empty spot. I sat carefully, trying not to scrape the chair too loud. My stomach growled at the first bite, which embarrassed me more than it should have. Between mouthfuls, she started firing questions like a checklist. You still in school, you have a job, any other relatives nearby? I answered as straight as I could without dragging the entire story onto the table. Each answer felt like it cut my options in half. You'll start looking for work today, she concluded, setting her fork down. If you're old enough to live on your own, you're old enough to contribute. My chest tightened, but I nodded and said I would go out after I cleaned up. The promise came out quicker than my confidence in it. After breakfast, I showered faster than I ever had in my life. I kept the water low, kept my movements quiet, and dried off speedily. I folded the borrowed towel into a neat square and placed it exactly where she'd left it. It sounds obsessive now, but back then it felt like survival. I spent the rest of that day walking into anywhere that had a help wanted sign. Each place had its own version of we're full, leave a number, come back later. By the fifth attempt my feet throbbed, and my voice felt raw from repeating the same thin pitch. I trudged back to Mark's place, rehearsing how I would explain a day full of nothing. When I stepped through the door, shoes squeaking slightly, the living room went quiet. Mark sat on the floor with a game controller, TV paused mid-flash. His mother rested on the couch with her arms folded, watching me like a test result. How did it go? She asked, eyebrows lifting. Filled out a couple applications, no one hiring right now. The excuse tasted weak even to me. She studied my face for a few seconds, like she was weighing lie against effort. All right, try again tomorrow and call your school co. Unseller, you can't drift. That night the sofa felt different. Not exactly hostile, but not as safe as it had a few hours before. Every footprint I had left in their space suddenly felt too loud. I lay there listening for their voices again, wondering what version of me they were building behind that hallway. A week in, I started to notice little changes in the air. Her greetings got shorter, his father's silence heavier. Mark still joked with me, but he also spent more time in his room with the door pulled almost shut. I could feel the clock running even if nobody mentioned a deadline. One afternoon, I tripped over my own bag in the doorway and knocked over a small stack of folded laundry. It hit the floor in slow motion and my chest seized. I bent down fast to fix it, hands clumsy and hot. His mother walked in right as I tried to restack everything. Her lips pressed into a flat, tight line. "This is what I mean by picking up after yourself," she snapped. "It's not a big deal once, but it adds up when someone doesn't belong here." That last bit landed heavier than anything on the carpet. I apologized and kept apologizing until I annoyed myself. The more I tried to fix each tiny slip, the more obvious I felt. Every glass I rinsed, every light switch I double-checked, turned into a reminder that I was running on borrowed grace. I could tell they were starting to notice the same pattern. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening. I was on the couch, knees pulled in, flipping through channels without really seeing them. Mark's parents came in together and stood near the doorway like they had rehearsed it. My fingers tightened around the remote even before they spoke. "We need to talk about next week." His father cleared his throat and shifted his weight. "You've been here almost a month, we have younger kids, this arrangement can't last forever." Younger kids hit me harder than the actual words. "We helped as best we could," his mother added, arms folded again. "But your parent needs to take responsibility, you need to work that out with her." The idea of walking back to that house made my lungs lock. I stared at the muted screen because if I looked at them I might break. "I can go tomorrow," I said, my voice thin but steady. "I'll talk to her, I'll figure something out." I did not believe any of that would happen, but they needed a plan on paper. They both nodded, relief flashing quick before they masked it. I started packing my things that same night. Every item I shoved into the bag felt like proof that I did not belong anywhere longer than a few weeks. Mark hovered in the doorway, hands jammed deep in his pockets. "This sucks," he muttered, kicking lightly at the baseboard. "Yeah." It was the only word I trusted not to crack in the middle. He asked where I would go if my mother refused to let me in. I told him I'd figure it out, and we both heard how empty it sounded. As I zipped the bag, a muffled sound came from the kitchen. His mother's voice, sharp but controlled. Then another tone, familiar in a way that made my skin prickle. I moved closer to the hallway, feet silent on the floor. "You think I can just keep him?" My mother's voice shot through the doorway, ragged and loud. "He attacked me, he's lucky I didn't call the cops." The word attacked slammed into my chest, knocking the air sideways. I pressed myself back against the wall, heart pounding in my throat. "I understand you're upset," Mark's mom replied, quieter but firm. "I just needed to know how long you plan to leave him with us." There was a pause, then my mother again, bitter and quick. "He made his choice when he laid hands on me, I'm done." In that moment, I wanted to kick the door open and yell the truth. I wanted to drag the whole night into the light, step by ugly step. Instead, I stayed frozen, back plastered to the wall, nails digging crescents into my palms again. Cowardice and self-preservation felt uncomfortably similar right then. When the call ended, footsteps moved toward the hallway. I darted back to the sofa and grabbed my bag, pretending to adjust the strap. Mark's mother stepped in, eyes flicking to my face, then to the luggage. "She's not willing to take you back, not right now." I managed a nod, even though my vision had gone narrow. "We can give you a couple more days," she went on, voice softer. "But after that, you'll have to find another option. This house is small." That last sentence stung more than any accusation. Later, lying awake on the couch again, I replayed her words. "Attacked, laid hands on me, done." In my memory of that night, I had backed away from the doorway as fast as I could. Hearing her twist it into something else told me exactly how the rest of the family would hear my name. I did not sleep at all before sunrise. By morning, my mind had stripped everything down to one rule. Whatever came next, I could not rely on anyone who believed her version over mine. That decision might not have been wise, but it hardened into something I carried for years. The supervisor slapped the schedule on the counter and tapped my name. "You miss another shift and you're out." Grease smoked behind him while I wiped my hands on my apron. I nodded fast, because losing this job meant losing the one thing between me and the sidewalk. My legs ached from standing, but I moved toward the fryer anyway. Orders kept hitting the screen and I kept moving on autopilot. Every tray I pushed across the counter felt like one more tiny payment toward a future I could not picture. I told myself if I lasted 3 months, I could stop depending on anyone's sofa. On my break, I perched near the back door with a paper cup. A coworker dropped onto the crate beside me and bumped my shoulder. "So where you living now?" he asked, half curious, half bored. "Got a place with friends," I answered, eyes on my untied shoelace. He shrugged and launched into a story about quitting school. I let him talk while my brain chewed on my own lie. If you tell the same line enough times, it starts to feel like a mask you can't peel off. I remember thinking that if anyone saw underneath, they would bolt. After closing, the manager handed me a small envelope. "Don't blow it all in one night," he joked, tapping it against my chest. My fingers tightened around it like it might vanish. That first paycheck was thin, but it was proof that someone paid me for something I did. Outside, I counted the bills under a streetlight. Rent numbers spun through my mind in shaky math. There was no way I could cover anything alone yet. Still, stuffing that money into my pocket felt like loading bullets into a slingshot. A week later, I stood in a cramped office holding a stack of forms. The woman behind the desk slid a brochure toward me and asked what made me drop out. I told her life got in the way, which was my polite version of everything. She circled a date on the page and warned that if I missed the exam, I would wait months. That night, I spread practice sheets on a diner table. The server eyed my empty glass, so I ordered the cheapest drink again. My head pounded from the low buzz of other people's conversations. Every wrong answer felt like proof that my mother had been right about me. Around midnight, my eyes burned and letters blurred. I pressed my thumb into each page corner so I would not slam the book shut. If I walked out, nothing changed. If I stayed, there was a chance things might tilt in a different direction. On test day, I nearly missed the bus. I sprinted the last block, lungs straining while my backpack bounced. Inside the building, a proctor checked my ID with a bored glance. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the pencil. Halfway through the math section, my brain stalled. Numbers crawled across the page and refused to line up. I closed my eyes, counted to 5, then rewrote the question in my own words. I told myself that even if I failed, at least I had walked into the room. Weeks later, I went back to the office for the results. The same woman rifled through a stack of envelopes and pulled mine free. "You passed," she said, nodding once like it was routine. My legs felt unsteady, like someone had yanked a board out from under me in a good way and a scary way at the same time. I walked out holding that paper like it might blow away. On the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. No one on that list was the person I wanted to tell first. I slid the phone back into my pocket and laughed under my breath because apparently I still wanted her approval. The fast food place led to a stockroom job a few miles away. Heavier work, slightly better pay, fewer bored teenagers asking for extra sauce. I learned how to move fast without smashing anything and how to keep my head down when tempers flared. By then, I trusted supervisors more than relatives. When I finally signed a lease, my hand shook over the last line. The landlord slid the keys across the table with a practiced smile. "No parties, rent on time, no drama," he rattled off. I promised all 3, thinking I could at least control 2 of them. The first evening in that small place, I sat on the bare floor with a cheap meal. Boxes doubled as furniture and my back complained against the wall. Still, that space felt like mine in a way nothing else ever had. Silence pressed in, not hostile this time, just unfamiliar. Paydays became a cycle of decisions. Groceries or a second shirt. Bus pass or one more bill chipped down. Every choice reminded me there was no backup if I slipped. A guy at work kept nagging me to join a social app. He said everyone from school was on there now. I brushed him off at first, then one slow afternoon he yanked my phone out and started a profile. "Relax, man, reconnect with people," he grinned, thumbs flying. Later that night, I lay on my mattress scrolling through. Oh, he suggested contacts. Old classmates popped up with wedding photos and graduation shots. Each name dragged up a version of me I did not really miss. Then a familiar last name flashed by and my thumb froze. Her picture sat at the top of a list of people I might know. She stood with 2 younger kids tucked against her sides. They all wore matching shirts and wide smiles, like an ad for a life that never cracked. My chest tightened so suddenly I had to set the phone down. Curiosity beat anger, so I opened her page. Post after post showed school events, birthday cakes, crowded living rooms. Underneath, comments piled up about what an amazing parent she was, how strong she had been through hard times. I scrolled faster, hunting for any mention of an oldest child who did not fit the picture. There was nothing. No photos before a certain year, no awkward teen in the background, no hint that I had ever shared her last name. It was like her history started fresh the moment those new kids arrived. I remember thinking, so that's it, I get edited out. I hovered over the message button, thumb trembling. A dozen versions of an opening line flashed through my head and died. Every one sounded either pathetic or explosive. If I reached out, I knew she would twist it into something ugly for the same audience cheering her on. Instead, I clicked follow and did nothing else. I watched her life from the distance of a screen, new posts stacking over old wounds. Whenever work felt pointless or the apartment too quiet, I would pull up her page and remind myself what I never wanted to become. Back then, I told myself I was done needing anything from her, though some part of me kept checking that profile like it was waiting for my face to appear. My phone rattled across my desk and almost hit the floor. Unknown number, no message, just that long vibration that gets under your skin. I almost let it time out. I swiped at the last second, more annoyed than curious. Is this Daniel? The voice was young, rushed, a little shaky. I said yeah and asked who was calling. I'm your sister, she answered, and for a moment I thought it was a prank. I laughed once sharp just to buy a second. What's your actual name? I asked, fingers tightening around the phone. Emily, Mom's daughter, your sister. The way she stressed sister made the room tilt a little. My mouth went dry and my brain scrambled for a script. I asked how she got my number. From your profile, Mom kept checking if you would reach out. That line landed wrong, like someone trying to rewrite the opening scene. I told her I doubted that story. She sucked in a breath like I had slapped her. She's in the hospital, Emily pushed on. She had a stroke, they don't know how long she has. The air in my chest turned heavy and stubborn. I asked which hospital and she listed it off with practice speed. She keeps asking for you, she calls you her boy, it's freaking everyone out. That last part sounded more honest than the rest. I spun my chair away from the computer and stared at the wall. I had a deadline, a meeting later that week, a life that did not include that woman. Why now? I asked, my voice lower than before. Because this might be the last chance, Emily whispered, and I hated how much that got to me. Who else is there? I asked, already knowing the answer. Family, friends, pastor, everybody. She hesitated on that last word like she knew it might spook me. They all keep saying you should be here. I pictured a room full of people who knew one version of me. The one who supposedly hurt her, wrecked her life, vanished. Showing up there felt like walking straight into a courtroom without a lawyer. Let me think, I said, which was a lie because the decision was already chewing through me. After we hung up, I stared at my calendar. Colored blocks filled the week, all of them suddenly flimsy. I picked up the phone again and called my manager. Family emergency, I told him, and for once that phrase was not a dodge. He asked how long I would be gone. No idea, I answered, rubbing my forehead with my knuckles. He grunted, then told me to do what I needed to do. When the call ended, the room felt too small for the choice I had just made. I pulled a suitcase from the closet and tossed in whatever I grabbed first. Nothing folded, nothing planned, just handfuls of clothes and a shaving kit. The whole time my mind ran worst-case scenarios like a broken projector. Every version ended with me taking the blame in some new creative way. At the airport, I stood at the gate and seriously considered turning around. The board flashed delays and destinations, and none of that mattered. I kept imagining her face when I stepped through the doorway. Would she cry, or would she tell everyone I finally came crawling back? On the plane, I pressed my head against the seat and shut my eyes. I tried to rehearse something calm and adult. No, P, you're comfortable, or we should talk, or even what do you want from me? Every line sounded fake coming out of my mouth. So I switched tactics and pictured not going in at all. Landing, renting a car, driving right past the hospital to some cheap motel. Waiting there until she either recovered or didn't, then flying home. That version felt safer and disgusting at the same time. We touched down and my stomach lurched harder than the wheels. As I followed the crowd toward baggage claim, my phone buzzed again. Are you here? Emily asked, voice tight. Yeah, I answered, and the word tasted like metal. She met me at the curb in an older sedan. When I stepped closer, I recognized her from photos I had seen online. She stepped in fast and hugged me like she had known me for years. My arms came up slow, surprised by how solid she felt. Two kids were in the back, faces pressed to the window. I knew them instantly as the smiling pair from her page. Seeing them in real life hit different than scrolling past them. They stared like I was a late addition to a show they already followed. "That's him," one of them whispered like I could not hear. Emily shot them a look and motioned for me to get in. The ride out of the airport stayed cramped and quiet. Every bump in the road made my jaw clench harder. "How bad is it?" I finally asked, watching the highway blur past. "She can talk kind of, but it comes and goes," Emily answered, fingers tight on the wheel. "Sometimes she's herself, sometimes she drifts. She keeps asking if you're coming." I could tell she was holding back on something, and I knew I would hear it from someone else if not from her. "What did she tell everyone about me showing up?" I pushed. Emily chewed on her lip and kept driving. "She keeps saying she wants to make things right," she finally said. "Some people think that means you should apologize too." There it was. The cost of admission. My throat burned and I laughed once rough. "Of course they do," I muttered, and the kids went even quieter in the back. We pulled into the hospital lot and found a space near the entrance. As we walked in, the automatic doors whooshed open and that sterile smell hit me. Hospitals always feel like they're holding their breath. This one felt like it was waiting to see if I would bolt. The waiting area near her unit buzzed with low voices. Heads turned when we stepped around the corner. An aunt I barely recognized stood up first, hand flying to her chest. "Look who finally decided to come home," she announced, and the room shifted. I hate being stared at in the best situations. This was not that. Eyes raked up and down, measuring, recalculating old stories against the man in front of them. I could almost see them slotting me back into whatever role they already had for me. A cousin clapped me on the shoulder a little too hard. "Man, it's been forever," he said, studying my face. "Your mother has been through hell, maybe this will ease her mind." He meant my presence, but it sounded a lot like a request for penance. Someone in the corner muttered something about timing and guilt. I pretended not to hear it, even though every syllable landed. I realized they had already decided I owed her, no matter what actually happened back then. That old anger started waking up under my ribs. Emily tugged gently at my sleeve and pulled me aside. "She's in room 12, she said, glancing down the corridor. "They only let a couple people in at a time, so we need to be quick." Her fingers twitched around the visitor badge she wore, like she wanted to say more and could not. "Has she talked about that night?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Emily looked up sharply. "She just keeps saying she wants her son back," she answered. "That's all she repeats over and over." That word "son" scraped across old scars. I remembered how easily she had called me something else when it suited her. Now that she needed something, the title came back into play. It made me wonder if I was walking into a reunion or a performance. A doctor stepped out of the unit and scanned the room. "Immediate family for Ms. Harris," he called out. Half the people stood, then half of those sat again, unsure. Emily raised her hand and nudged my arm forward with hers. "This is her oldest," she told him. He nodded briskly, already moving through his mental checklist. "She's stable for now," he said, eyes flicking between us. "If you have things to say to her, I would not wait too long." The floor seemed to shift under my feet for a second. I had expected drama, manipulation, maybe even another smear campaign. I had not really pictured a clock running out while I stood in the hallway. That realization scared me in a way her anger never had. Emily led the way down the corridor, her steps quick and nervous. Monitors beeped behind closed doors, a steady rhythm that just made my pulse speed up more. Every doorway we passed felt like an exit ramp I could still take. I kept going anyway, even though a part of me screamed to turn back. We stopped in front of room 12. Through the small window, I caught my first glimpse of her in years. Smaller, wires trailing, hand resting on the bedrail like she was still trying to control the whole room. My fingers curled into fists without me telling them to. "You okay?" Emily asked, searching my face. I forced my hands to relax and nodded once. "Give me a minute," I said, eyes still locked on the woman in the bed. This was the person who had thrown me out like trash and now wanted me at her side. Emily touched my arm and stepped back toward the waiting area. I'll tell them you're in with her, she said. You can have some time alone before everyone else floods in. Then she walked away, leaving me with a closed door and a decision. I stood there inches from the handle, heart thumping hard enough to hear. All the versions of this moment I had imagined over the years twisted together. In some I forgave her, in others I unloaded every buried thing. I did not recognize the version who just stood frozen in a hospital hallway. My palm hovered over the handle, not quite resting on it. On the other side lay whatever story she was about to tell now. I knew that once I stepped through, I could not pretend I was untouched by any of it. So I drew in a long breath, held it, and finally closed my fingers around the door. I pushed the door open and her eyes locked on me. For a second, I thought she did not recognize me at all. Then her mouth trembled into something between a smile and a grimace. My boy, she breathed, and the sound dragged every old wound into the room. I stayed near the foot of the bed, hands jammed in my pockets. Up close, I could see the slack on one side of her face. The other eye tracked me, sharp and almost suspicious. Come closer, she whispered, fingers curling toward me like a slow hook. I forced my feet to move until I reached the chair. I flipped it around and sat with my arms on the backrest. It felt childish, so of course I did it anyway. If she wanted a kid, she could look at the version she threw out. You came, she murmured, studying my clothes like they were a report card. I didn't think you would after what you did. That line landed before anything like I'm glad you're here. There it was, the old script already rolling. What I did, I repeated, keeping my voice low. I wanted to hear which version she planned to run with. She swallowed and tried to adjust herself on the pillow. You called those people on me, she rasped, eyes flashing. You tried to tear this family apart. My fingers dug into the chair until my knuckles ached. You mean when I called and told them your boyfriend was hitting us? I asked. The word "us" slipped out before I could stop it. Her jaw tightened and silence stretched between us like a bad bridge. You made it sound worse than it was, she muttered, looking away. He lost his job after that, people stopped inviting us places, everyone talked. She drew in a ragged breath and shook her head. You didn't just hurt me, you wrecked everything we built. I stared at her, stunned by the math in her head. You put me out on the street with garbage bags, I said. That was your solution to a phone call. The heart monitor kept its steady rhythm while mine hammered out nonsense. Her gaze snapped back to me, sharp and almost offended. You slammed that door into me, she shot back, hand twitching near the blanket. You raised your voice in my house, you got in my face, I was scared. Each sentence came shorter, more clipped, like she needed them to hit fast. I grabbed the frame so you wouldn't crush my foot, I answered. Yeah, I yelled. I was a pissed-off kid who did not want to be thrown away. I leaned forward, elbows on the chair back, feeling the old anger heat up. But I never hit you, and you know that. Her eyes glistened, and for a second I saw doubt slip through. Then she blinked hard and shoved it down again. I told them you snapped, she said, voice going thin. I told them you shoved me and I fell. They believed me because I'm the mother. There it was, clean and ugly. I actually laughed once, short and disbelieving. You lied because it was easier than admitting you picked a man over your kid, I said. The words came out steady, which scared me more than shouting would have. She flinched like I had thrown something. You don't understand what it was like, she whispered, fingers clawing at the blanket. He said he was done if there was drama. I had bills, I had mouths to feed. Her voice cracked and she looked at the wall instead of me. So you told everyone I attacked you, I said, laying it out flat. You let them hate me for decades so you could keep your life neat. I heard my own pulse in my ears, loud and stubborn. I missed every holiday while you played V. Item of the year. Her hand crept toward mine like a slow apology. I did what I thought I had to do, she murmured. I kept a roof over those kids, I kept food on the table, somebody had to. She let her hand rest near my wrist, not quite touching. I was a mess back then too, I admitted, staring at her hand. I broke things, I screamed, I gave you plenty of reasons to be furious. It hurt to say it out loud in that room, but it was true. I was never the monster you told people I was, though. She closed her eyes for a moment, chest rising in shallow breaths. I've replayed that night so many times, she whispered. Sometimes I remember you yelling, sometimes I remember you shoving me, sometimes I wonder if I made pieces up. Her lips shook, and that last sentence sounded more honest than anything else. That sounds like a start, I said, leaning back in the chair. You can tell them you mixed things up. You can fix it while you're still here. I nodded toward the door where I knew half the family waited. You can tell them I was trouble but not violent. Veer flashed across her face, quick and sharp. If I change the story now, they'll think I used them, she hissed. They'll turn on me after everything I've survived. She looked back at me, almost pleading. I just want peace. There it was again. Her peace paid with someone else's reputation. What you want is a quiet conscience without doing the work, I said. You want me to soak up the blame and then let you go feeling holy. She reached for my wrist, and this time her fingers closed around it. Please, she whispered, grip surprisingly firm, I'm running out of time here. Say you forgive me, tell them we made it right, don't leave me like this. The monitor ticked on, out of sync with the panic in her eyes. I looked at her hand on my skin and felt 16 again. Backed against a doorway with nowhere to stand that did not hurt. I can forgive you and still not fix your story, I answered slowly. I'm not signing up to be the villain again so you can die comfortable. Her grip loosened and her hands slid back to the blanket. You always were ungrateful, she muttered, voice suddenly rough. I brought you into this world, I did my best with what I had. She stared at the ceiling, refusing to look at me now that I had broken the script. A knock hit the door before I could respond. Emily poked her head in, eyes jumping between us. Sorry, she murmured, stepping inside, the attorney is here. He wants immediate family present. She held out a folder like it weighed more than it should. My mother's gaze sharpened at the word attorney. Bring him in, she ordered, some old authority sliding back into place. I stayed in the chair, jaw clenched, watching the pieces arrange themselves. Something told me this next part was not really about apology. The lawyer stepped in with brisk politeness, a notepad tucked under his arm. He nodded toward my mother, then toward us. Given the circumstances, your mother asked me to review her estate documents, he said. I'll keep this short so we don't tire her out. He opened the folder and flipped to a clipped stack. There is a current will on file naming her 2 younger children as beneficiaries, he continued. Years ago, she executed a separate document, removing an older child from all provisions. His eyes flicked toward me just long enough to make the point land. My mother shifted against the pillow, watching my face. I was angry back then, she muttered, not very quietly. Kids make mistakes, parents react, maybe I went too far. She lifted her chin a little, that's why I asked him to come today. The lawyer placed a second sheet on top of the first. This would reinstate you as an heir, he said, tapping the page. It also contains language acknowledging that all past disputes have been resolved. He did not linger on that line, but I heard every word. This is for you, he added, sliding the document closer. You can read it over and decide, there is no pressure. The room went quiet except for the machine near the bed. All eyes were on my hand as it hovered over the paper. I scanned the paragraphs, mouth going dry again. The money did not even hit me first. The part that punched hardest was one sentence near the bottom. I confirm that my mother has always acted in my best interest. It read like a bad joke. I laughed, not loud, just enough that Emily flinched. You want me to sign a statement saying she always did right by me? I asked. I lifted the sheet so everyone could see where my finger rested. That's the price of admission here. The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. The language is standard for these situations, he began carefully. You can request edits if certain phrasing feels inaccurate. His tone said nothing about actually changing anything major. My mother fixed me with a tired, iron stare. I'm trying to. Oh, make this right, she rasped. You get your share, the kids don't fight later, we leave this world as a family. The word family tasted sour coming from her mouth. Emily's eyes shone as she looked between us. This could help everyone, she said softly, fingers twisting the edge of her badge. We don't have to dig through every old fight, we can just move forward. I could hear the hope in her voice and it hurt. I laid the document back on the tray, nice and neat. I'm not signing something that says she always protected me, I said. That's not a tweak, that's fiction. My hands were steady now, which surprised me more than anyone. My mother's face hardened, the apology mask slipping. So you'd rather let them think I abused you on purpose, she snapped. You'd rather drag all this out while I'm stuck in this bed. Her chest hitched and the monitors jumped with her. I'd rather not lie about history, I replied. You want me to caution the story that kicked me out at 16. I leaned back in the chair and met her stare. I'm done carrying that for you. The lawyer shifted his weight, clearly wishing himself somewhere else. I can step outside while you discuss, he offered. No, I said almost before he finished. I think we're done discussing. I turned to Emily, who looked like she might break in half. This isn't on you, I told her, keeping my voice softer. You didn't write any of this, you grew up inside it. Her hands trembled, and she pressed them together like she could keep herself from shaking apart. You could still take it, my mother pushed, breath coming shorter. Even if you don't agree with every line, you deserve something for what happened. That last sentence almost landed, because I had waited my whole life to hear anything close. Almost was not enough anymore. You know what I want, I said, standing up. I want you to look at them and tell the truth about that night. I want my name cleared, not paid off. I glanced at the door, picturing the relatives on the other side. But you already told me you won't risk losing their sympathy. Her eyes filled again, but this time there was anger mixing with the shine. You're punishing me, she hissed, fingers clawing weakly at the blanket. You're leaving me with this guilt when you could take it away. She looked suddenly smaller but not cleaner. I didn't give you the guilt, I answered quietly. You earned it and you held on to it this long. My throat tightened, but I pushed through. I forgive you for throwing me out. I don't forgive the lie you keep feeding them. Her head snapped toward me, shock flashing across her features. You can't split it like that, she barked, voice rasping. Forgiveness is all or nothing, that's what church taught us. I thought about all the Sundays I had missed and felt zero regret. Then maybe church left out a chapter, I said. I can walk away without hating you and still refuse to rewrite your past. I turned to the lawyer and nodded at the folder. You can keep those papers, I'm not your witness. Emily caught my arm as I stepped toward the door. Please don't go like this, she begged, voice cracking. She's sick, we don't know how long she has, you might regret leaving angry. Her grip was stronger than she realized, and it almost pulled me back. I covered her hand with mine and squeezed once. I'm not leaving angry, I told her, and for the first time it was true. I'm leaving clear, that's different. She stared at me, trying to decide if she believed that. I looked back at the bed one last time. My mother's eyes were on the ceiling again, jaw set, chest rising in stubborn little lifts. She had the chance to open her mouth and change the story while I was still in the room. She kept it shut, and that was my answer. Without another word, I stepped into the hallway. Voices hushed as I walked past the waiting area, but no one stopped me. Outside, the air hit my face, sharp and real. I headed across the lot with empty hands, and for the first time, an exit that belonged to me.